downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine. Luke O'Kinnigan grew up close to the vineyards of the Constantia Valley, but originally wanted to be a vet rather than a winemaker. A weekend job working at a cellar door changed all that. After a distinguished career at Glenelly, owned by Bordeaux grande dame May-Eliane de Lencquesaing, he's now in charge at Vergelegen, one of the Cape's most historic estates, busy transforming the range and the vineyards for the better. Hello, Luke, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. It's great to be here, and I'm glad to see that you had a safe journey back.
I'm home. I had to watch a little bit of the Springbok match last night in the lounge before I got on the plane, so we're not going to mention that, are we?
No, I think we'll leave it, but one is always does well to remember how young that English team is, and they've got great potential if they can just deal with their discipline issues, should we say.
Well, thank you for being encouraging, at least. Let's talk about you. That surname, O'Kinnigan, Irish, presumably.
It is Irish, and if you had to translate it into English, it would be Cunningham. But my father's Irish, my mom was English. So when they did get married, it caused a bit of consternation with a Catholic marrying a Protestant, but it was all good. And my dad ventured out here on honeymoon with my mom because he had always heard about South Africa, because when he was studying medicine in Dublin, he studied with a number of South Africans, and they always spoke fondly of the beauty of South Africa. So he ventured out here, but first he had, it was quite funny. His grand scheme was that he would buy a Range Rover and drive from the UK through Africa to South Africa. And when he went into the Range Rover dealership and asked them, and the guy said, "What are you going to be doing with the Range Rover?" And he told the plan. The chap said, "No, I'm not going to sell you one because you'll need 3 Range Rovers to get through."
So he never made it.
At that stage.
Classic.
So, and they came down and loved it and never went back.
And you were brought up where? In the Constantia Valley, weren't you? I mean, right next door to Cape Town, basically.
Yes, I was brought up in the Constantia Valley, and so I suppose I've been around vines for a long period of time, and it was actually really Adi Bardenor's father that introduced me into the wine world, because after finishing school, I started working in a little shop at Constantia Wine Merchants. They had a little store there. And Artie's dad took me under his wing and started to introduce me to more and more things, Andre, and opened up this whole world of wine to me, because my initial plans were certainly not to go into wine. It was good to go into veterinary. And I had started down that path. But I mean, it was just so fascinating to me, the subject, and how diverse, and all the people that I was being able to meet through it as well.
So how far did you get with being a vet? I mean, had you applied and stuff and all that?
I applied, and I was actually doing a BSc to start to go to veterinary college, and I got 2 years down and then decided to swap across. And what was really the clincher for me was that I went to go and see the dean of the university, and I said, I've started this. Am I going to lose a lot of years to go back and start with wine? And he said, no, you can go straight across because they're both mathematics and chemistry based. So you can start.
Oh, okay. So you just transferred from being a vet. I mean, do you think you'd have been a good vet? Would you have been a good vet, do you think?
I'd hope so, because I mean, I love animals and stuff, and like my wife, she adores them, and we spend a lot of time fostering, whether it's kittens or dogs, and we've even had lambs that we've had to look after. You name it, we've pretty much had it. So I find it fascinating, and I am an animal lover. So I would like to think I would have empathy with the animals. I'm not so sure how good I would have been with the owners in the veterinary practice.
That's always the problem, isn't it?
Exactly. So, but I think it would have been an interesting field to go down. But I always find it fascinating going around the wine industry here and how many people started on different courses before they found the world of wine.
Well, it's amazing. Chris Elhite wanted to be a doctor, but I don't think succeeded in getting in. Andrew Molyneux wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, lots of people wanted to do different things and then kind of moved into wine. I mean, it sounds like, so you've kind of fell in love with it, working weekends and holidays at Constantia Valley alongside Andre, who's, Ardie Bardnall's dad, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I was doing weekend jobs, and then in the holidays I'd do a lot more. So in the holiday time, I'd join another a guy called Andre Rousseau, who was doing the viticultural at that stage, and spent a lot of time in the vineyards with him. So that's where I really got into it. And I mean, if I look back at my family, for instance, my eldest brother, he was big friends with Ardie. So we've always been around the Constantia vineyards and things like that. So I suppose it was a natural progression for one of us to go into it, although he kept to, I suppose, the family tradition of staying in medicine. So,
I mean, and were your parents wine drinkers? I mean, were you kind of brought up around wine?
My parents weren't really wine drinkers. My dad was more a beer drinker. It was actually my middle and eldest brother that introduced me into drinking wine and things like that. And as they started drinking, my dad started to get into it, and my mom. And so I suppose I came into it fairly late, as it were. But I just found it fascinating going around the different places the whole time and discovering what there was to offer.
So you switched, as you said, from veterinary studies to viticulture and enology at Stellenbosch University, and your first job was with Ardie Bardnall. So the Bardnalls sort of run through your early years in the wine industry. I mean, what a character. I mean, you always have a laugh with Ardie, don't you? But what did you learn from him? I mean, I always think sometimes he deserves to be taken more seriously than he wants to be sometimes. He's a bit of a joker, isn't he?
I think Ardie is actually incredibly serious, and he's... every move that he makes is incredibly planned and thought through, and it's very deliberate what he does. And I think, yes, a lot of the times he does have this persona of being the joker and things like that, but everything has got a very keen strategic point behind it. And I think for me, working with Ardie was such a breath of fresh air, in the sense of first going across, when you're studying at university, you get told you have to do things in a certain way. Where when I went across to work with Ardie, he broke that mold. And for instance, if you're looking at commercial inoculant, I'd say, like, why aren't we buying yeast? And you'd be saying, why must we buy yeast? You've got natural yeast, they're going to do this. And he was always challenging one's perception of things. And what was also a big help is two things that Ardie did. Is one, at Rustenberg, we used to subscribe to the Australian Grape Growers magazine, and Ardie used to always get it, and then he'd throw it across the table at one of us, and he'd say, go and read this and give me a synopsis of what the magazine is. And you'd come back and you say, I've read this, and he'd say, no, you've understood it incorrectly, go and read it again and come back with a proper answer, that sort of thing. And also, when I first actually started working there properly, Rustenberg had two cellars at that stage. They had the Rustenberg cellar, and they had another cellar on a farm actually very close to Vergelegen, called Neugedacht. And he basically said, you're going to go and run that Neugedacht cellar. I'll check in every now and again, but get on with it, So it was very much a sink or swim situation, and it was nice having in the background that you could bounce ideas off and things, but he was very trusting in what was going. But I mean, if I think back to that time at Rustenberg, Tim, it was an incredible team that Ardie had built. I mean, yes, you had Ardie and you had a guy called Randolph Christians underneath him, but I mean, there was the likes of Chris Molyneux there was Jean Smit, there was myself, there was Tassius that was there was also Cully Lowe was there. I mean,
that's a who's who of some pretty smart people, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it was an amazing team.
Yeah, I mean, you stayed there 5 years, and while you were doing that, you started acquiring overseas experience. You went to Bordeaux twice. I think you were at Chateau Furesal, weren't you? And at Angelus, and then once in California. Do you think it's essential as a young winemaker to travel, to learn how to make great wine?
I think it broadens your perspective, certainly. And at all the places that I went to, I learned a great deal. And also I thank Ardy for that, because he was the one that first pushed me and forced me to do it. And I'm in the fortuitous position that I've got an Irish passport. So when I went to go and work in whether it's the United States or in Europe, I could stay there a lot longer than a lot of people get afforded the opportunity to. So I got to see a hang of a lot. And if I think back to the time, for instance, if I was looking at working at Napa, I learned a lot from the marketing and how to build an iconic brand, if you want to put it like that. If I think of my time at Angelus, I learned an incredible amount in the vineyards and winemaking from spending so much time with Hubert de Bois, who I hold in very high regard. And at
Furesal, you were pretty much left to take over, weren't you? I mean, didn't the winemaker get ill?
Yes, when I just arrived, I met with Ev, and she picked me up at the airport, and we went back to her house, and she said, what is going to happen is we've got a solid team, but I'm not going to be able to be there over harvest. And I said, why? And she said, I have to go in for operation because I've got some cancer. I have to go and have that sorted out. So I can't be there over harvest. Can you just run? I'd like you to do the following things and just to get on with it. And it was an amazing time to be at Furesal with that, because again, you had so much responsibility, and it was a fantastic team that showed me a lot. I learned a lot from them, especially on the white wine side of things. And it's such a special property, Furesal. I mean, tucked away. I don't think people speak about it enough, and particularly their white wines that they produce.
Yeah, I was going to say better whites than reds. I mean, the reds are good, but I think the whites are much better. It's Grave, isn't it? Or Pesek.
Exactly. And I mean, those whites age unbelievably well. I mean, that's what's so exciting for me about those whites.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned working in Napa, and you worked not just at any old winery, but Screaming Eagle, which is a very famous cult winery. What makes a wine a cult? I mean, is it a kind of an American thing, do you think?
I suppose in a way, yes, it is. It certainly stems from there. But I think back to those days, Screaming's production was tiny, and if you look at a lot of those cult wines, they were tiny, they're big scoring. They've got their own unique characteristics that are coming out, which make them special. But I think for me, when I was at Screaming Eagle, it was at a very interesting time. And it was actually started from my time back at Rustenberg, funny enough, because there was a chap that came to work at Rustenberg, a guy called Massimo de Costanzo. And when he left Rustenberg and he went back to United States, he landed the job at Screaming Eagle, and that's when it just changed ownership. So he contacted me to ask me if I wanted to come across, and you had to go to a place like that. You couldn't miss it. And it was an incredible time to be there, because you had Andy Erickson that was just taken over. Nobody knew what went into making Screaming. You had this property. We didn't know what vineyards. There was no intellectual property that was left. And we're left trying to piece together how this wine came about. And it was actually a wonderfully simple cellar to work in. There was nothing fancy, and it was really an expression of its sense of place coming to the fore.
It was Cabernet based, presumably, wasn't it?
It was all Cab based. And that what was amazing when we were setting it up is that we did small parcel vinifications. So although the vineyard blocks were fairly large, we divvied them up into little 2-ton sections of picking, so we could vinify everything as an individual to try and find what were the eyes that were being picked out the whole time over the property. And it was a fascinating place. And I mean, you had different soil types. I remember one particular vineyard that was very close to where we stayed and where the cellar was, that had very, very shallow soils. And it was basically on rock. And it had its own unique character. It came out, it ripened way ahead of everything else because there was no water holding capacity and things like that. But you had to celebrate its uniqueness in the different places.
I mean, wasn't there a vineyard that was dynamited? Can you tell us about that?
Well, there was actually this vineyard when they were looking at doing replantings and things like that. There was this rock shelf that was sitting underneath it, and they decided to remove the shelf so they could get
with dynamite. And was that Michel Roland? I mean, he was consulting, was he, or not?
Michel was brought in consulting at that stage. I'm not sure if it was Michel's doing or if it was the viticultural consultant, because the viticultural consultant at that stage was a guy called Dave Abreu.
Yeah.
So I think it was between the two of them that they decided what had to take place.
Interesting approach to terroir, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on from California to Glenelly, which is the next part of your story, a very important part of your story, really. And you were there from the start, pretty much. I think, you made the first wines 2008. The vineyards had been planted in 2004 before you got there, right? I mean, did that feel like a big step up, working for such an ambitious new project owned by, one of the grande dames of Bordeaux?
Yeah, it was a massive step up for me. I don't think I really realized at the time when it took place. And the first vintage from their own grapes was actually in 2007. And funny enough, I had a hand in that because they vinified it at Rustenberg when I was working there, and that's how I first got in contact with Glenelly. And it was it's a magnificent property, and it was such a visionary lady that putting it all together with Madame de Lencquesaing, who, as you say, is the grande dame of the wine industry, and she's always looked at the road less traveled and things like that. If I think back to it now, if I was in her shoes, would I have let a 26-year-old come in and build a cellar and do everything? I'm not so sure.
I mean, she's still with us. She just celebrated her 101st birthday, isn't she? I mean, she's quite a character.
Yeah, I think it's the 102nd now that she's just had. Was it the 101st? Anyway, and I remember many years ago, she was saying to me once, she said, I think, don't know if I'm going to make it to 100, and this was when I think she was about 90. And I said to her, Madame, there's a woman of your ilk and who's got such a stamina. You're going to blast through 100 and you're going to keep on going.
He said, but my money's on you. I mean, and that lovely story that I think you told me once, that when you went to see her in Bordeaux, long after you'd started, she opened a bottle of Lafite, 1870, is that right?
She did. Went across. It was just when I started, and I went across and I was staying with her in her house in the centre of Bordeaux. And she said, I've got something special for us to drink tonight, and I'd love you to strive to achieve one day at the property. And I thought, sure. Okay, I wonder what this is going to be. And I thought if I'm really lucky, I'd have something like 61, and if I was really, really lucky, I'd have something from the 40s.
Or an 82 or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when I came downstairs and I peered around the corner on the table waiting for us was this 1870 Lafite Rothschild that she had pulled from their cellars. And it was amazing it was the first time I'd had a wine that was so old, and I was just blown away that it still had texture and vibrancy about it. Yes, it fell apart quite fast in the glass, but it was incredible to see something had stood the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, you were there for 14 years and you made some really, really special wines, I think. They just kept getting better and better and better. I mean, was it a wrench to leave after 14 years? I mean, is a bit of you kind of still there in a way?
It was difficult to leave because I felt really at home, and I almost felt like that property was my property in many respects. And I felt at the same time that I was only just getting to understand the vineyards and the property and the different soils that we had and things like that, and how different conditions were affecting them. I mean, when I first started there, we had these very, very young vineyards. So often, and it was a big joke amongst myself and friends of mine, because they would ripen so early because they were so young. So we'd be finished harvest and most guys were just starting to get going. And when I was leaving, we were only getting into what would be this normal cycle of that Simonsberg area. And I think we were also very fortuitous that at the stage when I was working there, ostensibly the vines were also virus-free. So they were operating at their peak potential and things like that. So, yes, it was very sad to leave, and I had an inkling of what I thought were some great wines that were coming up still and things like that. But I'd always said to myself, if certain jobs around the winelands came up, I would be tempted to go and throw my hat into the ring.
And Vergelegen was one of them, presumably.
It was, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about this property, it's an astounding property, and its history and its legacy and what it has produced in the past and what hopefully it will still produce in the future.
And how much did you know about the property before you went there? Had you met Andre van Rensburg, who was retiring in one sense of the word? He was retiring from the job. He's not a retiring human being, as we all know. You'd met Andre and knew what he was like, presumably.
I hadn't, to be fair, I hadn't come to the property that much prior. I remember coming out here when I was a youngster with my parents and things like that. But certainly the last few years before taking over, I hadn't been here. I met Andre before, and when I decided to come and they had appointed me, I did come across to come and meet Andre, and he was very gracious and stuff, and he took me around the vineyards and showed me what he thought was going on and different things. So it was fantastic to see his point of view. But besides that, we didn't really have any handover or anything like that. So
you just had to get on with it.
Yeah, and in a way it was actually perfect because, it's one of those things. It's fantastic when you come in and you don't have any preconceived ideas about anything, and it's a blank slate, and you're starting to really focus from the start. And I suppose in hindsight, looking back, my first vintage was the 23 vintage. And
not the easiest in which to start, right?
No, it wasn't. And we got blitzed here, with the rain. But what it did do, it afforded me an opportunity to be able to spend a lot of time walking through the vineyards and starting to understand exactly what was going on, because we weren't necessarily under the time pressure of having heat to get stuff into the vineyard, out of the vineyard and into the cellar quickly. And what was astounding actually takes me back to, if I think of Madame de Lencquesaing, I remember having a long discussion with her years ago, and we were speaking about Bordeaux and first growth, second growth and things like that. And we were just talking about investing in wines and vintages. And the one thing that she said was, in great vintages, everybody can produce great wines. because the vintage allows it. So in her opinion, in great vintages, you don't necessarily go and invest into first growth and things like that. You can find fantastic wines in Cru Bourgeois and things like that. But in very challenging vintages, that's when you invest in your first and second growth, because they'll still produce something stompy.
Good wine.
Exactly. And for me here, that's what I saw coming through with that, because, 23 was a really tough vintage, but I think we managed still to get some very interesting, good wines coming off it, because the property kept bouncing back.
I would agree with you. Just tell us briefly the difference between Glenelly and Vergelegen. Glenelly is on the Simonsberg, and Vergelegen is sort of Somerset, West Stellenbosch. Sometimes the Stellenbosch because it's not really Stellenbosch, but it is Stellenbosch, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in the Stellenbosch ward. But, if you're looking at us, we're on the one extreme side of it, right down on the coast. And we have our own little microclimate, I suppose you could say, because we've got this amphitheatre of mountains that forms, and we're incredibly windy down here. Growing up in Constantia, I thought I knew what the wind was before I came here.
You didn't?
No idea. So it's fundamentally it's much cooler here than what Glenelly was. And we've also got more sedimentary soils here, whereas Glenelly we didn't really have that. So we've got a very different portrayal of what the wines are compared to other areas of Stellenbosch. And in some respects, we're almost a little bit closer to Elgin than to the other side of Stellenbosch.
Interesting. So, it's a very good area for white wines as well as reds, isn't it?
It is. And I think with the climate change and things like that happening, and if it keeps on getting warmer, it's going to turn on our reds here even more. So only time will tell. But it's certainly, if you look at it historically, it's been very good for both. Andre made some fantastic red wines in the past. The property's always been well known for its whites as well. So I think we also, one of the interesting parts of the viticulture here was the percentage of vineyards that's dryland farmed as well, which gives, I think, a unique characteristic and a concentration that comes through on them. The only funny thing about those dryland vineyards is that we planted a new one a number of years ago. It was planted actually before I even came to the property, and it's still battling to try and get up to the cordon one to get
it's struggling a bit.
Yeah,
and 21 different soil types, is that right, you found on the property?
Yeah, they've identified all of those soil types coming through from granitic bases to sedimentary base, like I say, because if you look back to the farm, it was initially under the sea, then it became a river delta, and then it got exposed to what we have these days. So we've got these very complex soils coming through on it, and then you have this multitude of different aspects which come into play as well, and a little bit of altitude. And they produce incredibly different wines coming from the different sites. And it's very fun from a winemaking point of view to have all of these different complexities coming in, but at the same time, it's very challenging to see what is our definitive style, if you want to put it like that, coming to the fore.
It's a very old property, isn't it? They've been making wine for 325 years, something like that?
Yeah, well, officially it was started in 1700, but when it was started, stuff was already going, so has been very active in the wine industry. The Tennyson family, who was the second owners, were the ones that really drove the winemaking side of it and got it really going. But then over time, like large parts of South Africa, the vines were removed because of phylloxera. The interesting thing, though, about phylloxera, Tim, is that there's a professor called Paul Nugent. He's based up in Edinburgh University, and he contacted me the other day. I've known him for a number of years. And he said, "You wouldn't believe what I've found." And he sent me this transcript. He was going through old records up in Edinburgh University, and it was back in the 1800s, early 1800s or around there. There was a whole thing written by the team on Vergelegen, how they were going about combating phylloxera and what they were doing at the farm at that stage. So it has been integral to the South African wine journey for many, many years.
Do we know which wines they made in the 18th century? Would have been predominantly white, would it?
It would have been predominantly white, and from what we see, it's a lot of them old Muscat varietals and things like that. And we've actually planted a tiny little vineyard for historic value with what we think is one of the early varietals that they had here. But yeah,
what's that variety? Pontac or something?
We have planted some Muscat here, Muscat d'Alexandre. But I think I wish we were in the fortunate position of somewhere like Constantia, where they could find these very old bottles that they were still producing back in the 1800s and stuff. So,
and you haven't got those, obviously.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have that sort of record.
Just tell us a little bit about how you farm, and I wonder just to what extent your decisions are a reaction to climate change. You've talked about how many of the vineyards are dry farmed, and that this new vineyard sort of struggled a bit. How are you farming now?
Well, we're taking a lot of the principles from regenerative and organic farming and trying to implement them into our farming strategy and things, using a lot of different cover crops and a lot of composting and various things. And I suppose what we've been known for over the past few years, I suppose, is the massive amount of work that we're doing with natural predators to combat mealybug and things like that in the vineyards.
Because mealybug is the vector for leaf roll, basically, yeah?
Exactly. And we use drones to drop these predators around and have done extensive mapping of the farm and things like that. But we've also recently bought a whole lot of sheep. So we're going to start working with sheep in the vineyards to do grazing and things like that. And I suppose when I first started here, actually one of the board members posed it to me, what are we doing and what would a vineyard of the future look like? What do we think? So we've actually started doing a small project here where, just to get data for ourselves, we've planted out a new vineyard with a number of different varieties in it. We've done a white one, and we're about to start with a red one soon, where we're looking at things like Semi-Aubry and Vermentino and things like that to see.
And you've got Albarino, haven't you? Bit of Albarino?
Yeah, exactly. It's in that same vineyard. So it's all planted, and it's just for us to get data for future, so we know what's going on. Because, I mean, there's a big debate that's, I suppose, going on. If you're looking at climate change and things like that, is, you can look at new varietals, but your noble varietals are still the ones that are well known. So it's almost like a chicken and egg scenario if you bring something that's unknown on the market. And also, I was having a long discussion with my great friend at Meerlust, a guy called Wim Truter. And we were just talking about it, and we were just saying, if you're looking at the past, at all the clones and stuff that were, let's say, done for Chardonnay, in the past, you used to look at clones that were very disease resistant and much more resistant against wet conditions. So there might be a lot of clones that were thrown out back then because they weren't good against wet conditions, but they could have been incredible in dry conditions. So we probably have to look back to the past as well to see,
bring them back.
So, what's available. Yeah. So,
I mean, tell us a little bit about the wines, because you were pretty much given carte blanche to make quite drastic changes at Vergelegen. Had the brand lost its way a bit? I mean, making too many wines, maybe, and just tell us a little bit about what you changed and how you refocused it stylistically.
When I got here, I think the big challenge, we were making a hang of a lot of wines. If I remember correctly, there was 22 wines that were being produced. And a lot of them were relatively small batches of, let's say, Cabernet and things like that. And where one of the reasons why I decided to change was looking at it from a consumer's point of view, in the sense of, if you're looking at, let's say you're confronted with 5 Cabernets, are you going to remember which Cabernet you really enjoyed? Or you're going to get confused? And I was trying to just simplify and get clarity into the brand, and also have stuff that we have got a volume of that we can take to market, and take overseas and start to export and things like that. So basically, we went from these 22 and we cut it down to effectively 9 wines. And the big focus was just trying to get clarity of the tiering and of what we stand for as a property and what we think we produce really well.
But picking earlier as well. I mean, the wines seem fresher to me.
Yeah, I think it's... Look, I don't know what they did in the past in the cellar. I've just come in and worked on what I feel works best for our wines here and what suits my palate, and what I believe in. So I think in certain respects, we are probably picking earlier and looking for more freshness and vibrancy coming through. I think the challenge for me on the property here over the past while is that we've had 23, which is a unique vintage in its expression. 24 was pretty unique for us as well because we got battered by the wind. So I'm kind of still
25 great though. You've had a great vintage in 25.
The 25 is looking fantastic, but I think looking at the 24s, I think Tim, I think a lot of people are going to. They're not talking about 24 as a vintage, and it's going to be one of those vintages that's a missed vintage. You know, we're talking about Bordeaux and Madame de Lencquesaing. I think it's going to be a bit like if you're looking in Bordeaux and everybody spoke about 82 and it was lauded. Nobody really spoke that much about 83, but 83 as a vintage is incredible.
Except at Chateau Margaux, really. Yeah. Yeah. So, that was famously better than the 82, was allegedly. But, I'm interested. One thing you said, you once said that wine is a time capsule. I mean, what do you mean by that? Does it mean that when you're making it, you're thinking about its evolution 10, 20, 30 years down the line?
It's that, and I think it's a time capsule because once you've harvested, you're capturing that point in time, as it were, because it's a snapshot of what your geography and geology and everything's done at that point when you've received it. And that's why I view it as a time capsule. And I know it's very cliched, but the wine is a living entity, and it does continue to mature and show itself. And I mean, when wine is very young, it's very how can I put it? It's very forward, and it can be quite loud. But as it ages, it gets much wiser and much more settled, and has a much greater confidence about itself when it's aged as well. And I think that all ties into what my philosophy is, that this is time capsule and it expressing itself over a period.
I like the idea that wine gets wiser. Let's hope we get wiser too. You never know, really, do you? Last question is how you get away from wine. I'm dying to hear about the model trains. Do you build them? I mean, tell us about the model train.
I do build them. So I'm ostensibly focused on the old South African railways now. So I build steam locomotives and stuff from that period of time. That's why it's always a challenge when your great mate Oz Clark sees me, because we're meant to be speaking about
he
wine.
He talks about steam locomotives.
We spend the whole afternoon just speaking about steam locomotives. So it's a way that I can break away and go in somewhere else and just relax, and takes my mind off a lot of things. And I love working with my hands, and I find model trains, there's so many different aspects that come into it, whether it's from an artistic side, there's the engineering side, there's the carpentry and the electronics as well. So, and
they actually move as well, do they? You run them, right?
Yeah.
They're not just...
Yeah, I run them, yeah. So my layout at home is based on the George Neisner branch line. So, I drive my long-suffering wife crazy, because if we ever go up that way, I have to spend hours measuring bridges and things like that to get.
Well, I thought I knew you quite well, but I didn't know about the model trains or the Neisner railway line. Anyway, listen, Luke, it's been brilliant talking to you. I love what you're doing at Vergelegen, and I think you've already transformed many aspects of the winemaking there, and I still think the best is to come. So brilliant talking to you, and I'll see you very soon, I hope.
I look forward to you coming around, and I can show you a lot more what's going on. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Luke is such a thoughtful interviewee, and that really comes across in the wines he makes. I'm a huge fan. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Irakli Peradze from the Peradze Winery in Georgia. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @timatkin and on Instagram @timatkinmw. See you next week.